Hi, freedom fighters. If I handed you your dream portfolio today, would you have the energy and the nervous system to actually enjoy it? Or would you be sitting there with a beautiful balance sheet and a body that feels like it's been through a bushfire? Because this episode is your mission critical secret sauce that almost no property or investing podcast ever talks about: your biology. And today we're joined by Chris Barnes, an epigenetic health strategist, and we're unpacking why so many property investors are financially disciplined but biologically blind. You'll hear why stress and anxiety might not be a character flaw, but worrying that you can actually do something about. And you'll understand why doing all the right things still doesn't work if they're not the right things for you. And why Chris believes that genetic testing should be as common as getting a blood test, because it's your blueprint that allows you to drive everything else. Now, this special episode sits at the bridge between the W and the E of our property wealth clock, where W is your why. And if you're new here, make sure you circle back to episode 414, released late in December last year, titled Living by Design Part 1, so that you can start at the beginning and then follow the complete end-to-end 6-step cyclic process over the course of the year that will allow you to join the rarefied ranks of the top 5% of investors who achieve true sustainable success and financial freedom. And today, we start to bridge across to the E for examine. So no more guessing, and no more she'll be right, because now we start to inspect the key components of all of your capacity engines. So if you are serious about achieving sustainable success and financial freedom with the health span that will allow you to achieve it, and then be healthy enough to actually enjoy it long term, then make sure you stay with us. And make sure you stay to the end, where Chris drops a very simple Start This Monday challenge that will help you to make it happen. Plus a very special bonus for those of you that are ready to actually start taking action and building your preventative wealth and your health. So let's get invested.
Welcome to Get Invested on the Property Hub podcast channel, the leading weekly show for Australians who want to learn how to unlock their full self, health and wealth potential. I'm your host, Bushy Martin, and each week I go deep with the best investors, experts, leaders and founders to find out what it takes to break free from the grind, discover freedom and to live by design. Subscribe now and join me and get invested in the life that you really want. Let's get started.
Hi, freedom fighters. Are you building a property portfolio or building a pressure cooker? Are you chasing financial freedom while quietly losing your health freedom? And if you're brutally honest with yourself, are you successful outwardly, but on the inside you're relentlessly tired, foggy, snappy, and struggling to survive on intravenous caffeine and grit? Because here's the truth that no one puts on a glossy brochure. You can have the best strategy, the best suburb, the best spreadsheet, but if yourself and your health are cooked, your wealth plan will eventually cop it to you. Because here on Get Invested, you'll hear me bang on about sustainable success being the integration of what I call the 3 L's of self, health, and wealth. Where your self is your beliefs, your identity, your expectations, your mindset, and the story that you tell yourself. Your health is your happy habits, daily disciplines, and rewarding rituals around your sleep, diet, movement, recovery, your nervous system, and your resilience. And these 2 are fundamental to attaining and maintaining your wealth, which is your assets, the engine room that buys back your time and your choices. And these aren't 3 separate buckets. They're 3 interlocking rings. Because if you pull one apart, the whole thing falls on the floor. And I learnt this lesson very early. I grew up with a classic Aussie model of success. And that was about work hard, don't whinge, keep going, and she'll be right. And that was based on my dad, who was my role model, and he was an absolute 7-day-a-week workaholic. He was as tough as nails, his heart was in the right place, and he was always providing for us. He believed his job was to build our security first and then enjoy life later. But the body always holds a score, and we're about to find that out, because in his late 50s, his health absolutely collapsed. He suffered bowel cancer and multiple strokes. And the last decade of his life, well, he didn't lose it in one dramatic moment. he lost his freedom in slow motion. He was paralysed down one side, spent his time in a wheelchair with mum as his full-time carer. And this is not just a sad story, it's a warning label, because I see versions of this pattern everywhere. Smart, capable, driven Australians smashing it in business, smashing it in property, and smashing their goals, all while quietly shortcutting the very machinery that they need to enjoy it all. And here's the uncomfortable bit. You can build the perfect portfolio and still run out of time to enjoy it. And that's a shocking return on investment. Now, I'm going to keep this tasteful and practical, and none of what we're about to talk about today is medical advice, and we're not diagnosing anyone. But what we are doing today is lifting the lid on something that's critical that most high achievers ignore. What if your stress, your anxiety, your always-on nervous system isn't just personality? What if it's biology? And what if instead of pushing harder, you could understand your blueprint and optimize from the inside out? Because sustainable success isn't about compounding capital, it's about protecting the vehicle that's meant to drive it. Which brings us to today's very special guest. Chris Barnes is a epigenetic health strategist and a certified epigenetic performance coach who works with high-performing executives and entrepreneurs who look strong on paper but fill the cracks underneath. He's analysed over 500 genetic reports. He's spoken on stage with the likes of Dave Asprey and Wim Hof. He's been featured in Men's Health and is a keynote speaker at the International Mental Health Conference. But what I respect most about Chris is that he bridges the gap between ambition and biology, between performance and longevity, between drive and durability. And we're doing this because it's not some fluffy wellness chat. This isn't a performance conversation, a sustainability conversation. So welcome, Chris, and let's get invested.
Thank you, Bushy. Amazing to be here, mate.
Mate, I've been looking forward to this for quite some time, Chris. It's you're delving into an area that a lot of people just don't put a lot of thought to. They take it for granted. But there's probably a lot listening right now who don't know much about you. So I guess to kick things off, for anyone who's new to your work, can you give us a quick rundown on what you do differently, who do you help, and why do you do what you do, Chris?
Sure. I specifically help really busy men and women, generally in their mid-40s and 50s, just better understand their unique biology so that they can have more energy, better navigate how to eat right for their unique genetic needs, rather than just guessing and following a specific diet that is trendy, but may actually be causing more harm than good down the line. Mate, I get to the root of those needs. We take so much of the guesswork out, and the amazing thing is that it's based on your own biological needs, not just this one overarching umbrella approach that's good for most people. It's based on what you need. So it's so powerful, and I see it day in, day out in the coaching clients that I work with and the genetic reviews, the type of transformation that can occur when you start to meet these needs consistently on a daily basis.
Yeah, I love it. There's a lot we're going to unpack today that, again, I think people skim across the surface, and there's a number of terms that get thrown around on YouTube and all the podcasts these days, but a lot of people really don't get their head around them. Before we sort of start to do that, though, Chris, by the end of our conversation today, what do you want us to really feel, think, or do differently?
I want people to start investing in their health needs now and not wait for a sign or a symptom to flare up before they start to take accountability and start making those changes. We often have a very reactive approach to health in life, and I see it in probably more so than not in busy professionals. It gets pushed to the side as a priority. So I want people to really identify and be aware that your future health starts today, and we need to start doing the small, consistent things on a daily basis so that, in 10 or 15 years' time, you're not met with the fate that so many people do when they get that alarming, scary news from the doctor or some it's even scarier. They don't get that news, and it's their time's up, which is something that so many of us have been touched by. And so start investing now in your health.
Yeah, no, I love that, mate. I sort of want to start with a bit of your own story, if we can. And I've heard you say elsewhere that you've struggled with anxiety for most of your adult life, and that understanding your biological roots changed everything. So can you sort of walk us through what that means for you and how that relates to us?
I really thought that my anxiousness throughout business life, public speaking, and it wasn't just normal anxiousness, it was crippling at times. Like I'd get up to perform in a specific situation and it's almost crippling, right? Like blank nervousness. That's not normal. And I thought it was a true personality trait of me. But then once I actually dived into genetics and biology, I could see that for me personally, I carried some significant genes that influenced stress hormones, neurotransmitter balance, so dopamine and the calming neurotransmitters like GABA that can definitely make me more prone to stress and anxiety and anxiousness. And then combine that with a diet that was completely out of alignment with what I needed was actually making it worse. And that was eating certain types of foods that had synthetic vitamins in it, which make these variants function even worse. So I was completely out of alignment with my diet and lifestyle and my genes, and the symptoms, the expression of those symptoms were anxiousness, stress, inability to wind down quickly from really stressful situations. And it flowed into many aspects of like my career and just well-being as well. Like the more anxious you are, the slower you are to recover and to bounce back from stressful events. So understanding my blueprint allowed me to then eat in accordance with those, which was powerful, and then supplement with the types of nutrients I actually needed to balance my brain chemistry and to calm down that stress response. And then to also just always be mindful that I actually have to do the things to calm down my nervous system because I'm more prone to stress, right? So breath work and meditation, and not just because it's a very trendy thing to do, but because my biology actually needs this more than somebody else that can clear stress hormones better. So once you know those, you've got an instruction manual for you that just helps you thrive better. That was powerful for me because I spent 10 or 15 years of my younger years going through uni, just dealing with what I thought was me, a defect in me, in my personality trait. I still would rise above that, but it was difficult. And now, like if I get up and I do a presentation, I still feel nerves, and that's normal. You should still feel fear and nerves, and these are normal human biological senses and functions. But when they get to a point where the signals are so powerful that they're causing imbalance or inharmony in your system, you need to start to go, hey, something's off here. Dive into your biology, into your blood, into your genetics. Is there something here that at a deep root level is not geared to support what I'm trying to achieve here? And can I rebalance that? And the great thing is that with many of these things, you can improve the expression of those genes epigenetically through the things that we do and can control. So exercise, sleep, breathwork, food. And that's why I love genetics and I love epigenetics, because they go together perfectly. And often people that are struggling the most are either carrying severe genetic mutations, or they might have normal genes, but their environmental signals are just causing issues as well. So it's important to note that even with good genetics, you can still make them express differently with poor habits.
Yeah, I love that because there's a lot to unpack with what you just shared right there, because a lot of people go, well, that's just how I am. Well, there's a little bit of that, but as you've just mentioned there, the epigenetic environmental piece is really important. So how we're sleeping, how often we're sleeping, how we're breathing, the exercise we do, what we're putting into our bodies in various formats has and you know this way more than I, but from what I can gather, having studied myself in a fair bit of detail in recent times, has a massive impact on how we feel. So that stress piece, and the other, I think, really important part of what I'm picking up from what you're sharing already is that we're all unique. So we need to find our own particular blueprint. It's not all in the same family, therefore we're all the same. There's so many variances in this overall system that we call ourselves, that if we're not mindful of it and we just go, well, that's just me, and then just move on. If we can, well, no, we can make some improvements here with someone like you on the team to help them actually identify what those things are and what they can be doing differently. Suddenly life can look a whole lot better than what it actually is. So I love that. I want to sort of circle back a little bit now beyond the recent exercise, Chris, and get you to sort of give us a bit of a Reader's Digest timeline on how you'd gone from health and performance work into the genetics and epigenetics, and then focusing on working with high performers. Can you sort of take us through that journey?
Sure. So my initial background was working in the health and fitness industry, personal trainer, gym owner for close to 15 years, and learnt the ins and outs of nutrition and body transformation. But towards the end of that kind of 12 to 13 year mark, I realized that there's still so much more to health and well-being than just going to the gym and training really well and eating the right kind of balance of macros. And I feel the biggest catalyst for me to kind of deviate from that was losing my dad too young. He was 65, but he first started to decline in his mid-50s with brain cancer, and then died suddenly at 65, trying to get back into a healthy regime. Retired around 60, and very sedentary after that, and then just died suddenly one day in activity, and it really rattled me and caused me to start to reassess human health in many different facets. So I went and studied further into naturopathic health, and then further into genetics and epigenetics. I went across to one of the biggest health conferences in Austin, Texas, and met a really unique academy over there, and a doctor that was teaching people to interpret genetics and understand epigenetics all around performance coaching. And I hadn't really heard about genetics beyond, we have our DNA and our genes, and it's our blueprint. And some people have risk genes for disease, but nothing was focused on, okay, what's this preventative approach? But not only preventative, what happens if we're already in a good state of health? How do we improve it beyond and maximize our human potential? So this academy was all around limitless health and potential based on understanding our unique genetic traits and then optimizing it. And I've been working in that space. I sold the gym nearly 3.5, 4 years ago, and I've been focusing ever since, just working with high performers. Now, I didn't start out focusing specifically on high performers. I just felt that they were the ones that were seeking me out the most. They were dealing with brain fog and low energy. And at the time, there was a really prominent I would say influencer on social media that was talking a lot about specific genes, MTHFR and methylation, and it was really focused on brain chemistry, and these were the people that were seeking me out, and they were really proactive. These were high performance, and they knew that they had to do something to bring back their brains, to bring their stress levels lower. So I've just gravitated more into working specifically with high performers, because this line of work is perfect to give them the additional edge. Because many of them, not all of them are struggling in that department. Some are already doing a lot of things really well, and they just want to be better, right? So, and that's the whole point of understanding genetics and biology, because you can always leverage it up. Often I'm rebalancing from out of balance back to homeostasis, but once you're there, like, we can take it further, and that just is only going to enhance longevity, health span, brain function, better decision making, hopefully better wealth creation.
Love it. I absolutely love that. So working in that group of it, and what I guess I'm assuming you probably love about that is that you're working with people who are actually interested in improving their own health through those mechanisms, because they're always trying to improve probably every aspect of their life. In working with those, what pattern do you keep seeing with high performers, business owners, investors that is regular and perhaps scares you a bit?
This is something I've observed quite commonly actually over the last couple of years, and it's more in the people that are already doing a lot of the things really well, and sometimes they get in their own way with their healing, and sometimes they're trying to be so pedantic with improving health markers and measuring everything and overanalyzing things and stressing too much about some of these things that they're actually creating another load of stress that they're not aware of. And they wonder why things aren't improving or they're not shifting. So this is something I do see. Sometimes I need to just kind of strip it back and simplify it and say, okay, maybe we need to take less supplements. You don't need to be taking 50 supplements a day. And I'm all for measuring biomarkers, but sometimes like you can only measure biomarkers so much, and sometimes you just need to step back and just do the consistent things on a day-to-day basis and focus on other things, and not always being so pedantic on health. I have seen in some people, especially some people that might be out of balance, they're focusing so hard on the imbalance or the problem that they're kind of clinging to it and limiting the potential for the healing to happen. And it's often when they kind of just relax and surrender a bit and go back to just eating well and training well and doing some of the foundational things and take a bit of the mental angst and focus off things that they realize, oh, okay, maybe I got a bit too kind of focused on this problem.
I love it. You just described me. We're so
so many people, Bushy.
I'm sitting here listening to it and going, crikey, that's exact. Because if you are a perfectionist and you're a planner, then you're always looking at cause and effect, and you get down into the weeds with that stuff. And you're absolutely right. You actually start creating stories in your own head that adds to the stress that you're actually trying to get rid of. So and I used to rattle. I've eased off now, but I was taking 32 different supplements a day, from ATP to GABA at night to IG 2000 for my gut, to you name it. I could list it off to the point of ridiculous. And you're right. If you're not just allowing it to flow a little bit, and you're just monitoring on the 2% that are wrong instead of the 98% that's right, then you can actually be compounding the very thing you're trying to improve. I love that. On the other side of the equation, though, Chris, there's a lot of people who don't spend much time thinking about this at all. And you know, if I talk about the property investment world, where most investors inspect properties before buying, but they don't spend any time inspecting themselves, why do you think that is?
I think it's a hierarchy or a priority issue that we often put our wealth creation or our corporate duties ahead of our own health needs. And it's not until we are met with an issue that we finally kind of reprioritize that. I think human nature, we can quickly forget about ourselves and focus on all these other outputs until there's a pain large enough for us to act on those. And I would say that that's by far one of the biggest issues in men and women that are high achievers, that they're so dialed in to their businesses and their teams that they forget to eat well. They definitely forget to train. They forget to disconnect at night and sleep well enough. And all these things start to throw their human biology out and lead to issues down the line. And that's why this type of conversation is so powerful, because we want people to start to go, hey, the business, the corporate, the team, they're not significant if your health deteriorates to the point where you can't function or worse. So we need people to start focusing just on little things every single day that are adding back the currency that we need for better energy, lower stress levels, better recovery from day-to-day wear and tear. And this is something I see personally in the epigenetic testing that we do and aging relating to people's brains, because people are so on these days that it's showing signs of aging in the brain, and our brains use so much of our energy. And I know me personally, in the past, I was always on. And it wasn't until I realized I had to be off sometimes mentally. I'm like, oh, wow, this is what it feels like to just be out of my head and just resting and digesting. And often people just never do that. They're always thinking of the next deal or the next property or, the next acquisition. So we need to just be more mindful of, okay, diet, exercise, sleep, stress levels. What are we doing on a daily basis to combat all these outputs, all these energetic outputs? What are we doing to rebuild that cup?
Yeah, perfectly said, because you're absolutely right. The always on thing is almost sleep and rest and relaxation is almost treated as a nice to have rather than a must do, which compounds the problem, obviously. Yeah, let's sort of jump into the genetics and epigenetics piece in a bit more detail then, Chris, because I've heard you say on a number of occasions that genetic loads the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. Talk us through what that means and how that benefits us.
Yeah, absolutely. Simply, our genes are sections of our DNA, which are basically just instructions for our body, right? Our biology to function. And then sometimes people carry slight genetic variations, which might make the function of that gene not as effective. And this can relate to anything from producing the right types of vitamins in their body to balancing the right types of neurotransmitters for good mood and focus, or more anxiousness and depression, right along to everything from detoxification to the things that actually help us from aging, repairing DNA when it gets damaged. People are born with these from mum and dad, but the issue is epigenetics, which comes in from the environment, the way that we behave, eat, sleep, deal with stress. It ultimately influences the gene. So it can actually make a poor coding gene function even worse. So you might already be genetically more susceptible to detox issues. Then you throw in too much alcohol, too smoking on a Friday night, surrounding yourself with a lot of industrial chemicals. You work in that industry, so you're covered in chemicals every day. You don't realize that you're a poor detoxifier. Then, that's where they say genes load the gun, the environment. So everything you're exposed to pulls the trigger, because rarely is a gene the determining factor in health issues. When we actually look at it, genes themselves play maybe a small percentage of any chronic disease risk. It's all diet and lifestyle and environmental and what they're doing. So they're basically turning genes up and down. Think of epigenetics as just the software that's driving the genes, and heavily influenced by the things that we control on a daily basis or are exposed to. That's why chronic stress and poor sleep is so bad for our genes.
Yeah, it's bottom line. Let's jump into the stress bit right now, because it's something that becomes a trap for investors in particular, because in property, the biggest mistakes are usually made under pressure. So what does chronic stress do to decision-making and risk tolerance, not only for investors, but generally, as you say it?
Well, we know that chronic stress reduces the size of our brains. It actually affects how our brains function, reduces executive decision-making. So if we're under a lot of stress, we're not going to be making clear decisions. We potentially could be making poor decisions. And I want to be clear that acute stress is actually healthy, and we're designed to deal with acute stress, getting away from a threat, dealing with a big deal or acquisition. You want to be stressed. You want to get up there. It's going to prime you with more stress hormones, more dopamine. So generally, you're going to be more switched on to make a great pitch or a deal. But the issue is that this chronic low-grade stress that goes on and on, we don't resolve, and that can come from just poor night's sleep, irregular blood sugars, eating too much simple refined sugars that we're affecting stressing out our system. The biggest thing, when you actually look at what stress does, not only to the brain, it really corrupts most of our physiology if it's not attended to. And that it speeds up the aging process. And then we've got an age system, we've got an age brain, and we know that under pressure, it's not going to perform as a rejuvenated brain, or the brain of somebody with a lower cellular age.
Yes, absolutely right. Well, that tunes perfectly into my own situation, Chris, because back in my mid-30s, my all-consuming perfectionist workaholism meant that I actually ended up in divorce, and it was mainly because I was an absentee husband and father, because it was all about work, and I ended up burnt out, broken and broke. So I call it the triple B. That's certainly not a badge that you actually want to be proud of. And after that season, I got diagnosed with Hashimoto's, which is, you probably know, it's an autoimmune thyroid condition. So life was definitely throwing punches at me, and I was learning very slowly that toughing it out just wasn't a health strategy at all. So I actually took a lot of time then to do some detailed work, and I mean real work. So I got fit, I cleaned up my diet, I spent a lot of time with a psychiatrist. I did a lot of deep reflection. I unpacked a lot of the shame and the self-blame that was attached to all of that, and the I'm not good enough story that I kept telling myself. And for me, it tapped into some of that old wiring. So, I had this lifelong belief that I had to perform to be worthy and to be wanted. And there was the sort of reasons that story got written so early was that I suffered chronic asthma as a kid and spent, 3 to 4 days a week in bed struggling to breathe. And that nervous system learned something pretty simple, and that was to always stay alert, stay on, to never be a burden, and to never fail. So that became pretty much the hard wiring environmentally. And then fast forward to after my divorce, and I was lucky enough to meet my now partner in all things, Sonia, and then for the first time was actually accepted and felt safe in the world, if you like. And for years after that, I thought, yeah, right, I've dealt with all that. And then comes along COVID. And quite honestly, I felt like I was in the sweet spot of living the dream before COVID came in, because I was fit, active, binding. I was living by design, as I keep saying in the podcast here. But when COVID hit, I was I was locked down in quarantine in Barrenarring in the Mornington Peninsula, and we're in a mouldy rental at the time, and my body started doing things I just couldn't out-discipline. So I developed rampant cascading inflammation and a whole bunch of autoimmune flare-ups. So asthma returned after decades of nothing. I started suffering psoriatic arthritis, so aching joints, tendons, skin conditions, high blood pressure, exercise-induced tachycardia, foggy brain. And as always, as I sort of touched on earlier, my perfectionist tendencies went into fixed mode. So I did multiple blood tests, specialist supplements, breath work, acupuncture, meditation, the whole health buffet, if you like. And that's where I got really frustrated as I spoke to you off air, because every specialist was treating a slice, but no one was treating the system. So it felt a bit like whack-a-mole medicine, to be quite honest. And I got really sick of people managing the symptoms without actually understanding the cause. And that's really forced me to start looking at a much scarier question. And part of the reason why I say, Kenny, to get you on today, then the question was, well, what if this isn't random? What if decades of relentless self-imposed performance pressure and perfectionism and the hyper-responsibility that I felt and kept lifting the bar have actually kept my nervous system in permanent chronic stress overdrive? So what if my biology has been paying the price for a subconscious story that my mind might learn years ago? And this is why I think this conversation is really important today in that context, and that brings us back to that genetics and epigenetics piece. So given that context, Chris, I guess what I'm sort of keen to dive into now is, the testing, I think, is a really important part. You mentioned the blueprint a couple of times, and I think the blueprint's a really good term for it. What does your foundational genetic testing actually show people that standard checkups like going to the doctor often miss that will help with this?
We look at close to 111 really unique genetic SNPs. So SNPs are the variations on those genes that cover many health systems. So we don't just try and look at one gene and one reaction. We want to get a picture of systems. So detoxification, methylation, brain chemistry, longevity genes, to see if individuals are actually carrying variations in a number of different SNPs relating to those systems, which just gives us direction and clues into understanding that this person, for example, you mentioned a couple of really good things in that description of your health history, like being exposed to mold and autoimmune issues. We can see that, okay, if somebody's got these detoxification gene variations and then also high risk or higher risk for increased inflammatory markers, and then throw into it stress, then they're possibly going to see more kickback from moldy environments, where if they are living in a water damaged building, that they might develop more chronic inflammation or CIRS, chronic inflammatory syndrome, that then leads to other autoimmune issues like Hashimoto's. So many autoimmune issues kickstart with this chronic inflammatory response. It could be rheumatoid arthritis or psoriasis, and I see it in so many people that I work with. I too have kind of really battled 5 years coming through a really big mold exposure that absolutely wrecked my brain, and it's complex. And that's the thing, right? You go to just a normal GP and say, I don't feel right, and they look at some of your biomarkers and they might be within normal ranges, but you know you don't feel right. So you need to dive deeper. And when you start to look at genetics, you can see, okay, genetics are always risks, potential. If somebody has a lot of really high impact gene variants, there's a higher likelihood that if their lifestyle is not in harmony with this, they're probably going to get more kickback. And when we look at high achievers, high performers, they're sleep poor, generally running on a lot of stress, not recovering well, often medicating with alcohol or other stimulants, drinking far too many coffees. So they're a high risk candidate for kickback. And this is what we look at in genetics. We're not trying to diagnose a disease. I'm trying to look for vulnerabilities so that you're aware of, and then you're informed and empowered to go and support these regularly. Yeah, you might have a few off days where you miss the support, but if you start to support it most of the time, it doesn't need to be perfect. Most of the time, you're going to be in a far greater position long term than just not identifying these and then hoping that your system can just remain balanced. But unfortunately, we're so burnt out and stretching with our careers and not even careers, just being parents and in relationships. Like anyone that has children knows the demands of being a mum and a dad, and all the sport and school drop-offs and pickups, and then just caring to the food and everything. It's stressful. And then you throw a high demanding career into that mix as well. We need more support. And that's why I love the work that I focus in, because I look at ways to increase the energy, mitigate the stress, support the systems that help with repair and recovery.
Yeah, that's absolutely spot on there. The sort of staying with the stress piece at the moment, because it sort of senses to me like it's like pouring acid on a situation to some degree as a result of how we're responding to things. Are there any? How can the sort of our gene makeup actually predispose us to the anxiety, stress, and sometimes depression-like symptoms that flow out of that?
I often talk at keynotes, and I'm actually talking at a conference this year, which is the International Mental Health Conference, on mental health genes. And there's a number of key genes that distinctly influence our stress response. And if we have variants on these, they can make us more susceptible to imbalances in resilience. We just get more affected by stress. And if we're under chronic, prolonged stress, it gets even worse. And the thing is, if you carry these variants on genes, like there's one called BDNF or COMT, which deals with how we clear adrenaline out of our system, stress actually slows these genes down further. So if you're already coding low and then you're just chronically stressed, they function worse. And then you have less emotional resilience, up and down emotions, and sometimes just less ability to repair the brain from stressful events. And then you kind of see like the common burnout model in people where they're just frazzled and fried and just not happy, right? Like it's hard to be really up when you're so mentally just burnt out. And many gene pathways play a big role in that, but they can be supported once you know that you carry these. There's a lot of things from a diet, lifestyle perspective that you can just balance them better.
Yeah, okay, no, brilliant. Sort of returning to the property investor focus for a lot of our audience today, Chris. How does stress and fatigue show up in the likely property behaviours? I'm talking about FOMO, or fear of missing out, over-analysis, perfectionism, panic selling, or over-analysing and never buying. Can you put some sort of context around that for us?
I could imagine in that scenario that if somebody is running really high on dopamine or adrenaline and stress hormones, that they're going to run the risk of being, one, less resilient to make really informed decisions. We tend to make erratic decisions when we're under a lot of stress. We don't see the bigger picture, the potential, or just the plan B. It's always, okay, this crisis happened. This is the only way that I can see that we can get out of this. When you're in a really calm, collected, focused, balanced perspective, you can see many options or better options. So I would encourage most people that are dealing with really high pressure situations to come from it in a position of resilience and not being kind of overflowing with stress hormones, and you'll make better decisions and more informed decisions, and just be able to see better outcomes.
Yeah, okay. So flipping the lid on that a little bit, if an investor could fix one thing to improve their decision quality and long-term holding power, what would it be in the context of the work that you do?
Reverse their biological age.
Yeah.
We know that, and this is based on studies, that entrepreneurs that have reversed their biological age. So biological age is the age that your cells behave. It's not your chronological age.
Yeah.
And we can do this through all the diet and lifestyle interventions that we've discussed and we will discuss. But they were shown to have 20 to 30% better overall stress resilience scores and better decision-making in stressful situations. So slow down the aging process by focusing on your health on a daily basis, and you'll have better decision-making and less stress.
Yeah, I love that. So for someone who's time poor, and that's probably going to be most people listening in, what's the non-negotiable 3 improvements that you'd start with in that context?
Start your day getting up. Don't hit snooze. Get out and get some natural light. First thing in the morning, look up at the sun, get some natural light, move your body. This is powerful for activating so many of your cellular processes and your hormonal synchronicity, hormonal balance within your body. And then start your day with enough protein. So aiming for 20 to 30 grams of protein in that morning is going to balance your blood sugars. It's going to help build the right brain chemistry to make great decisions during the day. So all of your neurotransmitters, your dopamine, your serotonin, come from protein, amino acids. So starting your day with that is going to give you brain fuel and move your body daily. So make sure that you're doing some form of exercise. It doesn't need to be high intensity, an hour of training. It can be going for a walk in the morning. It can be jumping on a rebounder in your living room for a few minutes just to get your blood flowing. And the beauty of doing that first thing in the morning, it's going to spike your morning cortisol, which many busy professionals have low cortisol because they're burnt out or they've got HPA axis dysfunction because of so much stress. Boosting that in the morning is going to help them feel more alert and make better decisions from the get-go as well.
Yeah, love that. Again, flip side, what are the biggest silent sabotages that you've seen? You've touched on a few of them already, but just to bring that to a head so people listening going, oh, gee, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, not getting enough sleep.
Yeah.
Not disconnecting from like work in the evening, going to bed on their phones or still dealing with that. You need to have a good period of time before you go to bed so your mind isn't active when you're trying to go to sleep, because I see it so often in people that are working up until 8 o'clock and then they go to bed and they're like, I can't go to sleep. I'm like, because you're still running high on dopamine and stress hormones. We need to blunt that at night. So that's a wind down ritual, starting to do some calming activities at night. Drinking too much alcohol. We know that it's a toxin for the body. It speeds up the aging process and it's very inflammatory on the body. So that's one thing that's going to affect a lot of the systems in the body.
Yep.
And
yep. The flow on from that as well, because and it's related to alcohol to a degree, is the carb sugar routine, because carbs end up as sugar anyway, pretty much, as you would know far better than I. Talk to us about that a little bit, because I think, again, a lot of people just don't recognise the poisonous power of sugar in that context.
Carbs inherently aren't bad, but the type of carbs we're talking about, and I think what you're relating to, is the really simple refined sugars, the processed sugars. It can be breads, white breads. It can be too many grains, breakfast cereals. These types of, and also drinking like even too much fruit juice. High sugar is going to spike your blood sugar, spike your insulin, and these are very pro-inflammatory processes within the body. And we know that cognitive decline risk is very linked to insulin blood sugar metabolism. We see so many people getting fatty liver these days, not from alcohol, but from too much sugar in the diet. So really important. It's fine to eat carbohydrates. Just make sure they're the right type, real whole foods, slow release carbs. Hard to overeat fibrous salads and veggies and beans and legumes, and even sweet potatoes and potatoes are fine when they're balanced with good, just think whole real food. If it's packaged and refined and sugar, probably not going to be great for your health span, not going to be great for your stress. If you're already a highly stressed person and then you're having a lot of sugar because you're feeling flat, you're low, which is a common thing, right? It's either coffee or sugar that most busy professionals reach for because their neurotransmitters are low because they're running low on dopamine and stress hormones, and they're either going for coffee, a third or fourth coffee a day, further depleting themselves, or they're going simple sugars to get a quick win because, yeah, you do feel good for a second, but then you're going to crash harder and it's a snowballing effect. And then you put on more weight, and then that excess weight makes you more inflamed because that's what happens. And then, yeah, then everything you look at, everything you look at just puts weight on you, right? Because so metabolic flexibility is crucial for good overall longevity and health span. So we need to, eat well, move the body well, keep plenty of muscle mass on our body, and that's going to keep you, fit and strong, hopefully for a long time.
Yeah, there's a lot of reinforcing mechanisms here, either way, from what you're sharing with us. So, sort of coming back to where you come into the picture, for a lot of people going, oh, where do I start with this? What's the minimum effective testing roadmap in terms of what you do first, second, and third, so that those listening in saying, gee, I need to do something about this, don't get too overwhelmed?
I love that term, minimal effective dose, because I love that. What's the minimum we can do to get the most outcome? And I always steer people, if you're really looking to get serious about your health and you want to step things up and you want to know yourself better than you ever have, then getting a comprehensive genetic panel is such a smart way to do it because it's based on your variants. It's going to teach you how to eat that's more in line with your genetic needs. It's going to help you understand what micronutrients you might be high risk of deficiency at. It's going to teach you if you've got potential learning issues, stress, depression issues, and then, okay, are you more vulnerable to things that can affect how long and well you're going to live? And that's all the longevity genes and mitochondria energy-based genes that you can start supporting them. It's such a smart place to start. And it's something that I think the awareness is definitely growing because I've had only recently, like a mum jump on and buy a genetic test for her and her 12-month-old baby. Like, just so there's a lot of really conscientious parents that are going, this is stuff I want to know now. Why isn't every Australian given this at birth, right? Here you go, you're more susceptible to dairy, gluten intolerances. We're not going to eat that type of food. You need to stay away from these synthetic vitamins. You might be a little bit more prone to anxiousness. Let's support those now. It's just, that's where I would start people, because it's a segue to everything else you want to do. Like, then you can go and test some additional bloods to see, okay, I know I'm high risk here. What's playing out in real life in my bloods? Oh, I'm deficient in vitamin D. I know I need that for immune function. So yeah, that's where I'd start.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. It really does give you a roadmap of who you are, and therefore you know what to drive and what fuel to put in and how to service the car to make sure that you're going optimally. Yeah, I mean, you are the living example of health yourself, mate. You've got a radiance about you. Do you mind sharing us your chronological and your biological age, and as a living example, what you do to respond to your particular physiology and how that works for you?
Thank you for that kind comment. I'm a really unique example of this as well. My chronological age is 44.
Yep.
And the last biological age test that I did, I was showing that my cellular age was 50.
Okay, wow.
And this is really not uncommon, but
Yep.
it was a really distinct snapshot of the way I was feeling. And I mentioned like 5 years of chronic inflammatory, a lot of stress from mold exposure and just a lifestyle of running businesses, but also having to make a lot of financial decisions around business. I had to close a business down because it wasn't performing, and then dealing with that as well. So it didn't surprise me, but positively, my pace of aging, which was another measurement that we do, which is more of a speedometer of your aging,
right.
a more immediate snapshot of kind of where you're aging, was 0.89. So for every calendar year, you want to be 1 or below. So I was aging more youthfully, but the biological age estimate was a snapshot of everything that I'd endured up until that point. So I'm confident. Like, I haven't retested it, and I'm going to retest it after 12 months of being free from mold exposure and just working on these healing protocols. But I can tell you from a position of how I feel worlds apart. Like, the brain fog has subsided. I feel far more energetic. I look healthier. Like, during that period,
there's a vibrancy that comes across on screen, mate. So you can't make that stuff up. It emanates from the core of your cells. So whatever you're doing, you're clearly doing it right. And I think it'll be quite revealing when you do retest. You probably, you're not surprised because you're dealing with this all the time, but I probably would be. So no, I love that. Before we sort of bring things to a close, then I always like to ask this question: what's the one question that you wish people would ask you, and how would you answer that?
Why genetic testing isn't as common as routine bloods?
Yeah.
And then the way I would answer it is, I personally believe that genetic testing should be more commonly run than bloods, in a sense, for getting a foundation. I think everyone as I mentioned before, should have this information from such a young age, because it gives a wonderful snapshot, or as you mentioned, blueprint for so many aspects of our health and thriving. And then we should use bloods to check in and make sure that we're not out of range in those.
Yeah.
But the awareness just hasn't been there. And when I started in this space 5 years ago, it was a really hard conversation to have with so many people. When I would talk about it, it would be just, it wasn't there. It's emerging, Bushy, and I think it's great. But I do, and I see this so much in the mental health and emotional well-being space, that I seem to gravitate more to now, because it is a root of a lot of the dysfunction that a lot of people have. It's not the only cause. There's a lot of trauma and issues that also play a role in that. And then there's also a lot of other things like brain inflammation through exposure and gut issues. But there's a lot of genetic aspects that directly influence our emotional resilience and our risk for anxiousness and depression and things like that.
Yep.
If everyone had this information from a young age, I think our health would shift considerably. And sometimes bloods are misinterpreted as being fine when they're not fine as well, or they're an immediate snapshot of when you go in there, and then when you're out of there, they're different. You may have you may have eaten
One at times.
a fatty meal or taken some vitamins, and they're like, oh yeah, they're normal. 6 hours later, you're not normal.
Well, and the other thing too is I've found, because I've been deep diving on this subject myself, is the acceptable ranges are based on the average human. And if the average human's unhealthy, then that's not really an acceptable range at all. So we're probably benchmarking against the wrong things at times when we're starting to look at this. So it might be acceptable to the GP because he goes, oh yeah, that's in the normal range, but there's actually stuff going on there. When I had my Hashimoto's diagnosed, I was just on the threshold in terms of the T4 and T3. But when I talked to someone who really knew about it, I was like, well, yeah, it might be just threshold, but there's an issue here. That's why you're feeling sluggish, you're putting on weight. There's all of these things that were directly, and I was putting it down to other things. But I find that really interesting, mate. Look, we've only really just scratched the surface. It's been an awesome conversation, Chris, and it's one of those rare conversations, and not just interesting, it's actually critical, important, even if there's still a lot of people who don't realise it yet. And because you've taken something that you've really can feel intimidating to people, like that, when we start talking about genes and epigenetics and biology, but you've made it really human, practical, and actionable. Right? I really appreciate you taking the time to do that, and you've reminded us of something very simple, I think, and that is that most people don't need more motivation; they just need more precision about what's important to them. So we don't need to keep trying harder; we just need to try a little bit smarter. So now I want to quickly give you a blindfold and a cigarette and hit you with what I call the bushfire lightning round, which is just 4 fast questions, Chris. So we want some short, sharp answers, and I'm going to give you a cheeky disclaimer and a one nervous laugh as part of that. So we're jumping in. What's the most overlooked risk to a high achiever's health span?
Not getting their genetics tested would be one of the biggest risks, because they're flying blind. They're following protocols that may actually be not in line with what they need. And I see this in people following certain diets, carnivore diet, for example, or keto diet, and they carry variants which could actually make them more susceptible to cardiovascular disease or cognitive decline. So lack of knowledge and clarity with their true health.
Love that. Switching gears a little bit, what's the most underrated habit for reducing stress and improving performance?
Meditation.
Yep. And please sleep's in there as well, I think, to some degree. It would just
powerful.
Enough effort into sleep.
Powerful.
Going to bed at the same time, getting up at the same time.
Yeah.
Enough duration and whatnot. Yeah, love that. What's one red flag sign that our body is aging faster than it should?
Fatigue.
Yeah.
Fatigue, especially if it's really chronic and you're doing a lot of things, could signal that the energy centers in your cells, your mitochondria, are actually dysfunctional, and that's a driver of aging as well. Chronic fatigue.
Yeah, love that one. And finally, number 4, if we remember just one sentence from what you shared with us today, what should it be?
Don't wait for your health to fall apart before you start taking action on improving it. Start today.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. But the whole concept of preventative health is still something that I just don't think gets enough attention. And it goes back to what you're sharing. If we got our blueprint done early enough, then we've got something that we're managing it against. It's the old, we can't measure what we don't measure. So I love that. Sort of for everyone who's resonated with what you shared, like I have today, what's your suggested 7-day challenge that they can start on Monday then, Chris?
They can go across. I've actually just built a school community where listeners can go and join for free, and it's going to unpack everything that we've just spoken about there. It tells you all about genes and gene variants and how to do genetic testing, how to do it on a budget, right through to everything that's going to help you have more energy and sleep better and have just a more profound purpose and impact with your health and with your careers as well. So that's the school community. I would tell people to go and get started on that. In that is a 21-day health challenge that they can get started as well, which is going to take them through a full journey of just so many different approaches to optimize their health no matter where they're at as well.
I love it. And I'm going to, it'll be in the show notes and we'll have the links in the show notes, obviously, but school is SKOOL, not SCH.
Correct.
So for those that are tapping into this, can you share the special bonus that you're offering Get Invested Freedom Fighter listeners today, mate?
Certainly can. Any of the listeners that would like to dive deeper and understand the power of identifying your unique genetic blueprint, they can jump on and order a test today and receive 10% off that test and full consultation with me.
Yeah, brilliant. Awesome, mate. We'll encourage everyone to do that because that's the baseline is the starting point for really getting clear on where you're heading and what you need to be doing about it. Final question, Chris. If I ask you to get invested, what does that mean to you?
To step up and take full ownership for your health now. So to invest and to know that just like you would invest in your wealth creation, investing in your health today is actually going to pay dividends both in short term and long term as well. Because you know that the quality of your later years is determined by the things that you're doing now to support your health. And we see that, and we see it in everything that we measure and in the people that are in their 70s and 80s that are fit and thriving compared to the ones that don't do it.
Yeah, love that. Been an awesome conversation, Chris. I'd love to get you back at some point to dive in a bit deeper into some of the areas that we only really had a chance to touch on today. But before we close, for everyone listening, I want to leave you with some final food for thought. As investors, we inspect properties before we buy them, but most of us never inspect ourselves until something breaks us. So here's a thought. Don't wait for a breakdown to do a baseline, because compounding works only if you stay in the game. And I also want to share a quote of the week. Clarity is kindness, meaning when you get clear on what your body needs, you stop calling yourself lazy, you stop calling yourself weak, you stop performing through pain and fog, and you start making choices that actually fit you. So clarity is kindness because it removes the shame. And also remember that you don't get wealthy by making more money. You get wealthy by staying in the game, meaning that stress, burnout, and poor health are forced exit events. They wreck compounding, relationships, and decision quality. So if your health span doesn't match your wealth plan, you're building a shiny car with no engine. And here's a couple of takeaways. Takeaway 1, pick one health signal you've normalized and admits it's a signal, not a personality trait. Number 2, book one baseline test today, like your blood pressure, your blood work, or your sleep tracking, and stop flying blind. 3, choose one tiny habit that supports your nervous system, like 10 minutes of walking without your phone, or a hard bedtime boundary, or morning sunlight that Chris spoke about, or breath practice, or a caffeine cutoff, because small hinges swing big doors. Then set one boundary by removing your biggest aging accelerator, like late night screens, your sugar habit, or your alcohol frequency. And if you want to go deeper, here's another takeaway. Explore your blueprint with support. because test, don't guess isn't a slogan, it's a strategy. And if you're resounded with Chris like I have, first, click on Chris's links in the show notes to get access to his genetic test kits, coaching options and his community. And second, make sure you take advantage of that special offer by jumping on to school.com/Chris Barnes Wellness 8200. Again, link in the show notes, and use that code GETINVESTED to get 10% off genetic testing, plus a 7-day free trial of his school community. No pressure, just tools, because your health shouldn't be a mystery novel when you read at 60. So if you got value out of today, do a friend a favour and share the episode with the one person you know who is fine but clearly fried. And finally, if you're enjoying Get Invested, please follow the show, leave a review, and keep building your version of sustainable success. Now, as we close, treat our conversation with Chris as your bridge to take you from intention to inspection, from hope to clarity, because the goal isn't just a bigger portfolio, it's a bigger life. And you need to do that by integrating yourself, your health, and your wealth as 3 interdependent rings. So, freedom fighters, whatever you're building, build it in a way that your body can enjoy, because your portfolio can't go for a walk on the beach. You need to stay healthy enough to enjoy the living. So, Chris, thanks again. And until next time, remember to always get invested in yourself before you invest in anything else.
Thanks, Bushy.
Thanks for tuning in to Get Invested on the Property Hub podcast channel, your home for property investment insights and inspiration. Make sure you subscribe to Property Hub for free. Get your weekly dose of Get Invested inspiration along with every episode of Realty Talk, Australia's top online property show for red-hot property investing news and insights direct from industry leaders and influencers. And finally, I'll see you next time.